Ladies and gentlemen, from St. Lucia, Helen of the West, please help me welcome Prime Minister the Honorable Philip Pierre.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ceremonies. I would like to welcome you with an African saying, but since I'm from St. Lucia, I'll say Sakafet. Let me recognize colleague heads of government, Prime Minister of Barbados, Prime Minister of St. Vincent, Prime Minister of Grenada, Excellency President of the Afrexim, former President of Nigeria, members of the Cabinet of Barbados, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. 3 days ago, that is on Tuesday, 1st August, the people and governments of the member states of CARICOM observed Emancipation Day, a celebration of the freedom which enslaved African people in this chain of islands in the Caribbean Sea gained on 1st August 1838 from the British masters after 300 years. Emancipation on 1st August 1838 effectively brought to an end to a trade which forcibly brought our ancestors from Africa to work as slaves on the plantations in the then British Caribbean. It is therefore of no little historical significance that the launching of the CARICOM office in the Afrexim Bank takes place today, soon after these celebrations. In fact, in St. Lucia, emancipation activities are held throughout the month of August, and so this ceremony still fits in with our Emancipation Day observations. The launching of this office is therefore a reversal of the unjust and inhumane links that was forcibly set up between the Caribbean and Africa by Europeans 400 years ago. And it establishes the foundation for free, meaningful, and dignified relationships between CARICOM and African countries. This ceremony today also validates and pays homage to the many Caribbean men and women who over the centuries have sought to reestablish the proper bonds between the Caribbean and our African homeland. As far back as the late 18th century, the Haitian revolutionary leader, Toussaint Louverture, had conceived the idea of sending thousands of his best troops to Africa in order to put an end to the slave trade, and had allocated the financial resources to do so. In the 1940s, in London, George Padmore and C.L.R. James of Trinidad and Tobago, Amy Ashwood, Marcus Garvey of Jamaica, joined the future African leaders like Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana to agitate for African liberation. When Ghana became independent, Padmore was to become Nkrumah's advisor for African affairs, while St. Lucia's Arthur Lewis was his economic advisor. Another St. Lucian, Sir Danny Alexander, became the Chief Justice of Nigeria in 1975. Since that era, the ties between CARICOM countries and Africa have become minimal, and in the area of trade, there was practically nothing to write about. The partnership agreement between CARICOM and the Afrexim Bank is an opportunity to transform this, to lay to rest the ghosts of the Atlantic slave trade, and to usher in a new era for CARICOM and Africa. The economic sectors that have been identified for the bank's activities are critical for the development of the CARICOM economies, and will therefore give Africa a vital role in our economic futures. I'm particularly pleased with the proposed support for small and medium-sized enterprises as one of the priorities, as this is one of the priorities of my government, is to empower micro and small business enterprises to be stronger participants in our economy. What is also significant about the partnership agreement with the bank is that it represents a very good example of South-South cooperation. For decades, we have recognized and spoken about the necessity for South-South trade, as we seek to diversify the traditional ties that have characterized our international economic relations here in the Caribbean and also in Africa. The presence of the Afrexim Bank in the region will give practicality to our words. Only this week, St. Lucia took another step in South-South cooperation with the signing of agreement for a loan for the Saudi Arabian Development Fund for the completion of the reconstruction of the St. Jude Hospital in the south of the island. I therefore look forward to the bank truly fulfilling its role as a bank of the South, for the South, one that understands the peculiar needs of the South, like the threat of climate change, and a bank which responds accordingly with flexibility, speed, and generosity without the onerous strictures of some traditional financial institutions of the North. I also look forward to cooperation between the bank and the CARICOM Economic Fund and the Caribbean Development Bank. This partnership agreement of the bank, which virtually comes to life today with the launching of the office in Barbados, is a signal for us in CARICOM to deepen our relations with Africa. The government of St. Lucia is committed to doing so, and it's our intention to establish a diplomatic presence in some African countries. With the bank operating in the region for all CARICOM countries, it's perhaps time for CARICOM countries to establish joint missions in Africa rather than the individual diplomatic offices that some of us have in a few African states. Finally, let me compliment and thank all those who worked assiduously to make the launching of the bank in the Caribbean, in the CARICOM region, a reality. You have accomplished a great service to the people of CARICOM and Africa. And I say a special thank you to Prime Minister Mia Motley and to the President and Chairman of the bank and directors of the Afrexim Bank, Professor Benedict Omar. In April this year, when the bank announced that its board of directors had approved the opening of the bank's CARICOM office in Barbados, you said then, Professor, we are poised to right the wrongs of the Middle Passage. Today, we are not only poised to right these wrongs, but we have joined hands to open a new passage, a new crossing between African sons and daughters in the Caribbean and their brothers and sisters in Africa, one that can only lead to harmony and prosperity for all. I thank you.